Okay.
Thanks everyone for coming. We'll just let everybody get seated who's getting some food and some drinks, and we'll start. Because this is casual. This is nothing crazy going on. So just sitting down. But thank you everybody for coming. Make sure I have the right screen up there. My name is Kimberly Slater. I am the president of the Pennsylvania East chapter of ASID. I've been a member of ASID for over 17 years. I've been a member of IIDA for 6 years now. It's my 25th year in the industry this year, so it's really exciting to have an event such as this where we bring the different design organizations together, and it's mainly because of the people that you see on the panel here. Some who I've known for a really long time, like college, like Jen, and to some people I've met this year. But this event is a brainchild of Matthew McCarty, who is our chapter's director at large. We start our strategic planning back in June for our fiscal year that starts in October, and he said, I want to get something together, talk about the design profession. And the Center for Architecture and Design, Jermaine, Rebecca here, have always been great partners with the organizations. We recently had an event here with different leaders from different organizations, and we want to keep the conversation going. So I'm not going to keep talking too long, but I'm just going to go and introduce everybody as well. Okay, so of course, presented by the Pennsylvania East chapter of ASID. ASID will be celebrating their 50th anniversary in 2025, if you did not know that. One of the big things that I am an advocate for on the end of ASID, even though I'm a member of multiple organizations, is the idea that ASID is just residential, and it is not. Our chapter's been around here since 1975. We are over 500 members strong in just Eastern PA, Southern New Jersey, and Delaware. And as you can see by our fabulous new sign over there, our membership and practices all sectors of interior design. Everything from hospitality and retail to healthcare to education and residential design. So we want everybody to have that understanding that, you know, as also part of Matthew's idea about the conversation, people hear interior designer and they think we're someone that you see on HGTV. We're not. We design hospitals, we design schools, we design hotels, restaurants, everything in between. So we want people to understand that, and this event is just the start of that. So one of the things that's really important is, and this comes, it's a joint statement from ASID, CIDQ, which is the Council for Interior Design Qualification, and IIDA, that interior design is the creation and construction of an interior space that successfully meets the requirements of the end user and improves the human experience. Interior designers are responsible for providing a safe, functional, and accessible environment for our clients and meet this goal through attention, adherence, and focus on codes, standards, regulations, accessibility, health, safety, and welfare. We just don't pick that fabric and paint colors. So, good note. And this is something that I thought was very interesting. This was on our ASID national website, is that every day the interior design profession is affected by the issues deliberated in state legislatures, governor's mansions, and the U.S. Congress. So a lot of what many people sitting here in this room, their livelihood, industry partners who are in this room whose business is dependent upon the interior designer specifying their products, is affected by people who don't even understand what we do. So just kind of think about that. We, as an industry, specify over $4 billion worth of products a year. So something we learned at our national convention. So just think of how much we actually do impact lives. And the people who are telling us what we can and can't do don't have any part of that. So I want to thank, first of all, the Center for Architecture and Design, especially Rebecca and Jermaine and Jelani, who was helping us technically, and Alice back there for helping us out with this event and hosting us this evening and providing the space. Thank you to our sponsors, Boyd and McTavish Architects, and for letting us borrow Matthew all the time. Our sponsors, Corporate Interiors as well. We have Amanda and Mike Buck here joining us, and thank you very much. And Fessenden Hall, who I'm proud to work for the past 6 years. So thank you. So their sponsorships will be going towards legislation support. So your efforts, your ticket tonight will be split between IDLCPA and the ASID Advocate by Design Fund. So, and we want to thank our fellow professional organizations for joining us. One of the things that I have made part of our strategic planning that I really want as a part of this, and Chesenia, who's the president of IIDA, who's with us tonight as well, is sharing out our events, joining together to do things. 5 years ago, we joined together to do our Student Career Day. That will be April 5th this year. But we also, sharing out what we're doing, what other organizations are doing. Like, look at the calendar. We're all focusing on the same design community. Help each other out. Don't plan something the same night. Help each other. Look what you're doing, and share out ideas. Why reinvent the wheel? Maybe team up together. So this is one of the events such as, so for IIDA, the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware chapter, IDLCPA, which is the Interior Design Legislation Coalition. And to note about that, we have Jennifer, who's the president of that. It's the only legislative coalition that is recognized by both ASID and IIDA National. So it's just a very important organization in our area, and AIA Philadelphia. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then I'm going to hand it off to Matthew. So we have our panelists, Matthew McCarty. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not putting no screen. I'm looking on my screen. My apologies. I'm talking. I'm doing it here so I don't have to turn around. So yes, okay. So again, thank you, Boyce McTavish. We'll give them a big round of applause. Corporate Interior. My apologies. Okay, and our different organizations. So my apologies, I was not doing that. So I'm trying to multitask here and face people. Okay, so Matthew McCarty is our panelist. He is an allied ASID member, director at large of the Pennsylvania East chapter of ASID. He is a preservation designer at Boyce McTavish Architects that he started there 2 years ago, working on historic preservation and adaptive reuse projects. His experience includes higher and residential, institutional, and hospitality projects. He has a diverse background with a Master of Science in Historic Preservation. He's been everywhere, Iowa, North Dakota. Everywhere. So, and he, what I love about Matthew is when he was in school, ASID was, what did they tell you? Like, if you didn't join ASID, your career wouldn't go anywhere? Yeah. So, thank your school for
and
that.
Now
so, and now look at you. So, we thank Matthew for, Matthew put a lot of work in this event, so we thank him for that. Up next, we have Nikki Mancuso from IIDA. She's the VP of Advocacy for the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware chapter. She is an NCIDQ certified designer and a graduate from Philadelphia University, now Jefferson. She's a designer at Stantec here in Philadelphia, a few blocks away for the past 8 years, working on a variety of different scope and sectors of design. And she's passionate about seeing the interior design profession become recognized and respected for the immeasurable talent and skills that live within it. So Nikki Mancuso is joining us this evening. Thank you. Okay. Up next is Miss Jennifer Gibeon, who I've known way too long. If it tells you, our school does not even have interior design anymore, so it's been that long, yes. So they decided to put palm trees in the cafeteria versus keep the major. That was my thought process. Like, why are the palm trees? Oh, you're getting rid of major. Okay, you're going to spend money on that. So Jennifer Gibeon is an NCIDQ certified interior designer. She's the president of IDLCPA. She is the owner of JML Design LLC and has worked in the profession for over 20 years, starting her firm in 2011, and she's enjoyed a steady growth of practice, dedication to quality design and excellent customer service. And as president of IDLCPA, she's very passionate about providing equity, equality, growth, and development within the profession of interior design, and has really spearheaded IDLCPA's work with PA legislators through legislative sessions, throughout meetings with our Congress and government, and really working closely with adjacent professions to provide fair and acceptable language for interior design. So you can thank her for a lot of the work and her organization where we are right now. So thank you, Jennifer. Okay.
I'm looking to retire if anyone wants my
Me too. I'm president second time. Okay. So up next is one of my favorite people in the industry in Philadelphia, Mr. Rob Fleming. I met Rob a few years ago at a student panel at the Community College of Philadelphia where they had different heads of the organizations. And always approachable, always fabulous personality, and also an advocate for the interior design profession. So Rob is the newly inducted president of AIA Philadelphia, only a few weeks ago, so congratulations. And he's an award-winning educator, author, lead accredited professional, and architect. He's the director of online innovation at the Weitzman School of Design at the University of Pennsylvania, where he develops executive education and programs based on sustainable design. He's also a sustainability director at Francis Kaufman, FCA, Architecture in Philadelphia, New York, and Orlando. And he also serves as the board of director for the Architecture and Design, where he co-founded Justice Alliance for Design Education. He's the co-author of many books, and is currently writing another one on sustainability. And in his former life, he was the founding director of MS and Sustainable Design Programs at Thomas Jefferson University. In all his work, Rob strives to advocate for social equity in the built environment, regenerate the natural environment, and make beautiful places and bring economic viability to sustainability in projects. So thank you, Rob, for joining us. Okay, up next is Amy Wiseman. She is an allied member of ASID. She is our newly appointed advocacy chair, which is a new position within ASID for the Pennsylvania East chapter of ASID. She's the founder and award-winning principal designer of Wiseman Design. And for over 15 years, she's created exceptional residential and commercial spaces for clients both in Florida and Pennsylvania. She originally went to school at the Art Institute in Fort Lauderdale, where she served as the ASID student chapter president, communications chair, and many other positions in that area. After graduating, she began her career in South Florida, where she became actively advocating at the legislative level for state registration and certification of qualified interior designers and the accompanying independent ability to sign and seal documents for the permit. And it was only about 3 years ago that those acts were passed in Florida. So Amy was helping integral in that process. Now located in Bethlehem, PA, she's thrilled to join the efforts of ASID chapter for its advocacy in the profession of the interior design. So thank you, Amy. And last but not least, we have Rebecca Johnson. She's the executive director of AIA Philadelphia for the Center of Architecture and Design. She's an experienced nonprofit executive with an expertise in nonprofit management, real estate development, community and economic development. If you see her around Design Philadelphia, she's everywhere during Design Philly, as well as Renee back there. And she, as executive director, she enthusiastically represents the interests of the architectural community in Philadelphia, as well as creates compelling programming to engage and excite the public about architecture and design. In her relatively short tenure with AIA and the Center, Rebecca has led the facilities renovation, strategic planning processes, board reorganization, realignment, hosted an AIA National Convention, increased membership and engagement, and successfully managed a new revenue strategy for the center. So she does a lot too. And she's a staunch advocate for design organizations working together. So we thank her, the center, Jermaine, and the team here for allowing us to have the event here and helping us start this conversation. So I am now going to pass it over to Matthew, my son, for the moment.
Thank you.
I didn't want to go.
I'll come back at the end.
Thank you. Thank you. you everyone for coming out tonight. I think this is the first time we've had all these organizations together in one room, so I really appreciate everyone taking the time to be part of this and do this great. So now that we're all boozed up, we can talk about two important things in America, which is politics and religion. So, I'm just kidding. Can you imagine?
Thanksgiving.
No, we're going to talk about design and architecture. So with that being said, I'm just going to jump right into this. But in you guys' personal opinion, what's the difference between what?
You have a couple of slides you wanted to show.
Fine,
Yeah.
fine.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
You wanted to show a couple of these things.
Okay. What is the difference between an architect and an interior designer, and how are they similar?
What do you want to start with architecture?
Oh, sure.
You have to write up. I'll make you talk first.
I'm very shy person. I got it.
I'm a very shy person, so I don't really want to talk too much, which is a lie. So, you know, it's funny. I think about all the species on the planet are almost all that have all the same DNA, and I think that architecture and interior design share 99.9% DNA together. And so a lot of these differences are sometimes more superficial than they might seem to really be. And I want to say that you mentioned I did the sustainable design program. When we did that, we accepted any discipline into that program, and we didn't care what those disciplines were. And we let everybody be themselves and contribute to the project in the way that they could, the best they could. And then we made people switch. So we made the architects on the teams do interiors, we made the interiors do buildings, and all hell broke loose. It was out of control, and the architects were not happy. And so one of the things that we architects carried with is a little bit, and Rebecca, I think we carry a little bit of elitism here and there. And so that's sort of maybe where some of the differences lie, is how we view ourselves and each other.
Well, that just proves the point then, doesn't it? That we can't do necessarily each other's jobs 100%. So, yeah. So, yeah. I'm like, hey, anything to say?
Start
I
off
don't
with
know.
question one.
Anyone, really.
How is an architect and interior design, how are they similar and how are they different? I mean, from when I was going through, I guess, school, right, and our bachelor's degree, because that's kind of the starting off point where we both go in there. What was made clear to me was that the cutoff line is really when it comes to load-bearing features, walls, fenestration, things like windows and doors, that's kind of where we pass the torch to an architect, and that's kind of the dividing line for it. But what also is really stands out to me when it comes to the program is I don't know if there's lots of different facts and figures, but the correlation between interior design and interior architecture could be topping out like 80-90% of what our similarities are. And that's why it's so important for us to pull together when we're working on a project as an interior designer, that I'm not trying to do and be everything all at once. Rather, it's really important for me as an interior designer to pull in my specialists, pull in an architect when needed, pull in an engineer when needed, pull in audio-visual people when needed, to pull in the experts to really assemble our team. I think is the best way to get a job done, is to work together.
I agree, and also this slide behind me. So this is actually the similarities of how much between our professions overlap. So I think it's roughly like almost 70% of what we do is similar. So when we take the NCAR, when we take the NCIDQ, that like 70% of that is almost completely identical, other than structure and things other than that. So we really do a lot of similar things. But I'm really curious too. And this isn't the same everywhere, but I've known of like interior, like a college campus that has both an interior design program and an architecture program, and they're completely separate and they never communicate with each other at all. That's surprising to me. I don't know why we don't at all. Like I went to North Dakota State, go Bison, in Fargo, North Dakota, and like, really? And like the programs were like literally like across town from each other. They didn't even communicate whatsoever, which I think is kind of like an antiquated way of thinking too, that like we don't communicate at all. Like I would expect that interior design programs would invite architects to come to our critiques and vice versa, just to understand how the importance of one another personally. So that's how I feel about that. So. But in your opinion, what is the value that an interior designer brings to a project? Anyone?
Well, everything. No,
I think there is a level of detail on the interiors aspect that we bring to it, down to the very minute nook and crannies of the finishes and egress and the emotional impact, the how you get from point A to point B, how do you relate to your other colleagues, is it an integrated community, and getting that information from your client and how they want to work and how they want to function and put that into play so that their company can thrive, I think is a very minute detail that sometimes gets overlooked in a broad spectrum. So as amazing as architecture is, with the envelope and the creativity and the structure and the amazing three-dimensional design, we get to get in and be the nooks and the crannies of the completion.
I agree, and I think also in residential design, hospitality design, especially restaurant design, where you're really getting into like designing with a narrative and creating like the specifics of like what is exactly the fork I'm going to be using at this restaurant. I think that's when an interior designer really is like valuable in creating like this beautiful experience too. So it's a tangible experience too. Like how does the store not feel? How do I want to feel when I wake up? You know, now, hopefully not depressed or anything like that, but happy or otherwise. But so the title interior designer and interior decorator. I know. So,
Don't go there.
are often misused by the public and sometimes even within our industry. I think unfortunately, you know, HGTV is great. HGTV is also not so great sometimes from misinformation. And you know, what are the differences between the interior designer and interior decorator? Sway at it.
I don't have to answer them all.
Oh, well, I mean, at its core, it's, designers decorate, but decorators don't design. Designers require, education, we require exams, and decorators don't, but it's more about, decorators sort of embellish something that's already there, whereas designers create a functional space, or a functional design within a space. So, it's really more about like embellishing versus designing.
I also think that's when like specifically the health, safety, and welfare comes into play. Like an interior designer is focused on codes and things of that nature, and space planning and things like that. Whereas an interior decorator kind of goes to the whole HGTV, fabrics and paint and whatnot. It's the Karen who lives in rural Iowa who's like, I could be a decorator. I'm like, okay. My mom's name's Karen.
Well, I did, but I figured I'd probably should wait to the end. But you hit my ear that you're from Florida, and I worked in this industry in Florida. A decade ago. But that was so there was like a witch hunt on NCIDQ certification, and from a dealer perspective. If we were putting a conference table in the middle of the room, that was considered design, putting a measuring tape down from the clearance to the door. And I was curious if any of your work and advocacy changed any of that, because it was a $10,000 a pop fine if you put, we offer design on the back side of a furniture truck. And that was, I know other states like that too. The PA is not one of them, but can you speak to that?
I can. I don't know if you want to cut me off, but I'll get into
go.
a little bit
Yeah,
of the story and the background, because I went back to school in South Florida in 2008, and when I was getting my bachelor's degree at the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale, which is a private school, really expensive, the idea is that you graduate, and Florida had a Title and a Practice Act that was governing all of the interior designers in that state. So you can imagine my surprise that when I graduated with that degree, that same year that I graduated, there was that witch hunt.
Right.
And that was 2010, and poof, the Title and the Practice Act went out the door for a few years. And that was an extremely just discouraging kind of thing, where you have all of these student loans and you're going, why did I do this when I didn't have to anymore? And of course, this audience, we know the answer is because that we protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. But one of the reasons, the catalyst for that Title and that Practice Act being on the witch hunt, so to say, in 2010 was a decorator. It wasn't the architects who were trying to take that away from us. It was the decorator who wanted to not go to school for interior design, not get the qualifications that we have, the work experience, the NCIDQ exam, I mean, all of those things, years and years and years that we are working and training and gathering that knowledge to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, and it's just gone.
Yeah.
I kept hearing so many people, what's the point? You know, and I will be the first to admit, I went, why did I do all of this?
Yeah.
The NCIDQ exam, and we'll get into this later, is so much work, so much preparing. It's such an exciting but strenuous exam, and so, I mean, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is I'm a complete advocate for take, you know, your NCIDQ, take your licensing exam, because that sets the bar higher for the profession of interior design. And the reason why those practice and those title acts are so important in the state of Florida is because it protects the health, safety, and welfare of the public. I mean, there is nothing I think that can really be like debated about that. You know, like that there's no debate that I see. And again, that's why I do what I do. But fortunately, the state came to its senses, and I was not the driver of that car to make, you know, everything go back to the way it should be. I was just a bystander in the conversation. There was a lot of legislation. That's something we probably invite those people with us, because they're, you know, near and dear to my heart, but invite them up here and really start to see like what it was that was successful in the state of Florida and why they do what they do, because as you'll see in the other slides, they are the most strenuous in terms of legislation.
Jen, can you speak to the importance of Practice Act versus a Title Act?
Yes, so the difference is a Title Act is just basically protecting the phrase registered interior design. There are differences. If you graduate with an architecture degree, you cannot call yourself an architect until you're registered, correct, Rob? So in interior design, we're not looking to restrict the term interior designer. It would be registered interior designer, certified interior designer, whatever that may be. But what that means is you just then can call yourself that. You do not have permitting privileges, you do not have scope of work privileges. You, for your entire career, have to work under an architectural firm or a registered architect. Practice Act allows you to be a registered interior designer, certified interior designer with permitting privileges that allows you to do non-load bearing, let me make that perfectly clear, non-load bearing, non-structural but code regulated interior design. You do a general tenant fit out, which we all do every day, and you have the capabilities to submit those drawings for permit under your permitting privileges. No longer, unless there's demolition or structural items, no longer under the oversight of an architect. That allows independent designers to open their own firm. When I opened my own firm 11 years ago, the first thing I had to do was hire an architect, and I didn't have a project or a dollar. So, but in order to not break the law, I have a great architect on staff, but it was very difficult doing these interior projects and going, hi, please check my work today. So this being a Practice Act would allow us to stand independently, and you can remain at your architectural firms with nothing but higher standards in your profession and work every day with you. If you want to work on your own, then this allows you the ability for permitting privileges.
And it's crazy because even the map behind us, like back when I was in college, this would have been mostly legal.
Yep.
There wasn't a ton of legislation even a few years ago. So it's like rapidly changing, which is great news in my opinion. But so this is kind of along the same lines, but interior architecture as a title and profession is becoming much more common. In some states such as California, the title of interior architect is considered illegal. With that being said, what are the differences between an interior architect and an interior designer? And should the term architect in any context be strictly reserved to those who hold a license in architecture?
I think you might be, or
And we were briefly talking about Rob and Nikki a moment ago. I mean, I got some opinions, but I'll let you.
Well, so I just, what you were just saying about architecture being a protected term and how you can't call yourself an architect until you pass the AREs, I believe that's what it is. So like that aside, I think a good question would be, do we think that the term interior architecture actually does a disservice to the the term interior designer, because we have to then, we basically have to call ourselves an architect in order to be taken seriously. So it doesn't do a disservice to, you know, the profession as a whole of interior design. That's just a question that I have.
I think it's a good question, if I could jump in. I think it's a good question. I think, look, I've had 9 boards of 20 architects for 9 years, and varying degrees of angst or anger around other people calling themselves architects, but I literally have a branding consultant who hands me a proposal that's called brand architecture. And, you know, there's my IT folks, are talking about my systems architecture. You know, I think in some ways, I do think that this is really insider baseball stuff because the rest of the world is using architect in different ways all the time, right? So I'll just say that. I think that AIA nationally for a long time has been grappling. We got rid of intern architects a few years ago because you can be an intern and be 35 years old, and that's insulting. So this sort of terminology is an ongoing conversation, right? About the terminology is changing because the way the public is using it is changing. But I do think that, you know, so I am not an interior designer, I'm not an architect, I'm a lawyer and a nonprofit executive. But I also have a sociology degree. And Rob and I share a lot of this. You really focus on sort of equity and why certain things are the way that they are. And I do think that there's a gendered thing to architect versus interior designer thing. I think that it has roots in sort of not putting women on equal footing. And so I'm responding to the interior designer versus interior architect in that vein, is that I think that it's like, for me to be an accessible woman leader, I don't have to act like a man. So I don't want to I don't have to emulate those types of things. I'm going a little off script, but I do think it's relevant to the context, the social context. So
You brought up things that are sort of invisible, and I heard you say that people don't want to be looked down upon. And so there's a history of one group looking down upon another group, and I see a lot of nodding in the audience. I also want to say, I give a shout out to Brian here, the next AIA president. So we're here, we're listening, right? And I think that's a relatively new thing.
But I'd love to like jump in here because there's like sociology and then there's like individual psychology. And in 9 years of having a board of architects on the AIA side, I've had more ambivalence about the fact that architects are working besides interior designers every day, and a lot of them aren't paying attention, but also aren't really interested in fighting it all that much, right? Like it's just different. There's a scope of, there's the Venn diagram, which is like to jump into it. There's the Venn diagram of what is the overlap between what an architect and interior designer do on a daily basis and the kind of permits that they want to submit. Right?
It's significant.
It's a significant
My
Venn
IIDA
diagram.
has
Right. And so I think that, like, I just want to say that even though there's like elitism, there's elitism in every profession. We live in a chauvinistic male societies, you know? So there's elitism everywhere. So I would just say that it has not been my experience, as the executive director of AIA, it has not been my experience that the leaders of this chapter for the past 9 years are interested in being elitist pricks. They're actually pretty progressive and want to be broader and it's more inclusive. And so this is not going to be the last time that AIA is going to be at this table. So,
well,
thank you.
And I think for us, the part of this is the listening part. I've already learned 3 or 4 things that I didn't know tonight, and I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't know this, but I'm going to admit that I don't know them. And so we got a lot to learn on our side. There's no doubt.
Maybe you can write a book.
Matthew, and speaking, like you just said, our area right here has 4 prominent design programs. We have Jefferson, we have Drexel, we have Moore, we have Harcum, it's a 2-year program. But look at Drexel's interior grad program. It's a Master of Science Interior Architecture.
Yes, yeah.
Well, and also,
it's like,
I'll speak to that too, because honestly, and this is my own personal opinion,
I mean,
I don't see the difference between interior design and interior architecture.
No, but why isn't it called interior design?
Right.
Because I think people think interior architecture sounds more important. perhaps.
It's a marketing tool.
It's a marketing
I think-
tool,
yeah, it
but
is.
yeah.
That program,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
marketing tool, and I think that's the same is true of Jefferson. I don't think it's any more than that. I graduated with that degree. My title is interior
I don't want to be
design.
an interior architect.
Well, I think, well then it's like, what if you went to a program for interior architecture and then you live in a state like California or now other states and they're like, you can't call yourself that. So it's like, why, I don't think it really benefits you. It's like, why not just be an interior designer? You're doing the same thing.
It's a little lie.
California's a little messy. They live in the sun too long.
Yeah.
They're just kind of their own little amoeba.
Yeah. I lived there for a while in LA. It was so very expensive to live just like other people.
Well, the word design is actually broader than architecture.
Yeah.
The architecture is the exterior envelope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
So we can be designing anything and know how that wall is put up, what that wall is made of,
Mhm.
what the material is made of. We may even design that material that we're putting on that wall.
Yeah. And I think
That's design.
yeah, I think design should be used universally. I think though a registered interior designer is a different than just design in my opinion. But I don't know if you guys have something to say. Yeah.
oh, well, I have a lot of these fun little stories, but my fiance is an architect, some of you know him. We met at school when we were at Philly U, and the other day we were walking the dog and we ran into some neighbors, and they were like, by the way, like, what do you guys do for a living? And I said, well, I'm an interior designer, and they said, oh my God, I just redecorated my living room. I should ask for your opinion. But then they turned to my fiance and they said, well, what do you do? And he says, oh, well, I'm an architect. And they're like, so you design buildings? That is so cool. And he's been very good about saying, you know what, he also designs buildings. It's just she focuses on the interior. And I do think it's important for, others, allies, to advocate as well, to stick up for us when they can.
I agree. And good thing you locked that down.
Yeah. Rock climbing, something more like you.
Well, can I ask Rebecca and Rob, do you think that way of thinking too, the kind of like superiority is a little bit antiquated?
I don't think it's really reflective of the majority of the architects that I know,
Anymore.
quite frankly, anymore. But it's like I'm like being a big sociologist tonight. Sorry about this, guys, but I think that it's you don't get rid of racism by like being like, oh, let me flip a switch, right? It's like built into everything that we do. So it's built into the words we use, the language we use. I do think that I am serious. I think there's just so many things. I think I'm optimistic, Jennifer. I'm optimistic about this year.
Me too.
I'm really optimistic about this year. National finally got rid of their prohibition on even negotiating on this topic of interior designer licensure in Pennsylvania. So I'm optimistic. And then there's like a lot of work that we could do together. Like AI is coming. Y'all, this is something all architects and interior designers need to get together and talk about this stuff because, there's just things that we do that was like the 70% on the exam and the 70% of the work and the Venn diagram that we could be doing more together. So,
well, I also think that if we have so much similarities for what we do, why wouldn't there be a licensing exam for interiors and being that's crazy to me. It's like, wouldn't you want it to be? Whatever. Anyway. So, if Pennsylvania adopted a Title Act, only individuals who have met those qualifications for licensure may call themselves interior designers or registered interior designers, excuse me. What are those qualifications for licensing?
They're
I don't have them memorized from NCIDQ.
Well, you should have had them.
Do you have a
memorized.
slide? I thought you were going to have a slide for that.
Sorry, Jennifer.
That's fine.
You can find them on CIDQ.org. There is, speaking high level, there is a 4-year accredited degree and then a certain amount of work hours under a licensed or registered professional, and then you have to pass the exam. Those hours and whatnot, I did it 25 years ago. Oh, you have it? Hold on.
Thanks. All right, I have the little cheat sheet. So, one of the other things that's important to note is that the NCIDQ exam is an international exam. It's not just in the United States. And one of the qualifications for being able to take them has become even more stringent, which I 100% am behind. But as of February 1st, 2024, the qualifications in order to take the exam have been tweaked to a 200 hours of, this is work experience. After your bachelor's degree from an accredited university, you will need to have 200 hours of pre-designed programming work experience, 200 hours of schematic design work experience, 200 hours of contract administration work experience, 300 hours of design development, 400 hours of construction documents, and 200 hours of professional practice in order to be able to be qualified to even take the exam. So they're really ensuring that we
You know your stuff.
We know our
Yeah.
stuff. You know,
I'm behind that. I can get behind that.
I'm behind that.
Yeah.
I'm
No, I
behind
think it's good. I mean, and also, like, I know a lot of individuals are in a hurry, right, or in school to, like, start taking NCIDQ, which I think is great. If you can start taking some of the exams, it's fantastic. But I do think you should have a little bit more of those working hours before you, like, you know, at the age of, 21, start designing. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, and there's some changes in architecture that are unpopular among some, but there are 31 schools in the U.S. where you can take your ARE exams while you're in school and right after you graduate without work experience. So there's this,
Which is where you learn.
and Brian, you probably didn't know that either, but there's a lot of disruption right now in higher education. Architecture in itself is in disruption right now, so it's actually a good time to work out some of these differences. So there's internal battles within architecture schools about, should architects always work for 3 years after they graduate before they take the exam? Most people would say yes. However, we know that we learn structures in 4th year in architecture, we forget it. We go back, we take our test, we restudy, and we pass that. Could you take structures while you're a student? I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I just learned this today. I actually had a meeting with NCARB today, and they were really proud of the fact that they had changed their stance about interior designers and the pathways that are available. So there's a lot of disruption. I think it's healthy in the way that these discussions are happening. But it's really complex, and it's really confusing still to me. I have to be honest, I'm working through it. We have ways to go, but we're getting there, right?
Yeah.
I think it's different for each person too. Like, you know, some may find it easy to take the exam right away, or some might. I mean, I just haven't taken the exam yet, so I'm going to say that, yeah, I want to wait a while before I take it. But what has been all of your guys' experience? Well, I'm sorry, Rebecca. And taking licensing, like pursuing licensing, whether it's NCARB or NCIDQ.
Sure, yeah. What has been my experience?
Your experience, like studying or like preparing for the licensing of NCARB or NCIDQ.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I took it 5-6 years ago, but I started taking it, well, I graduated in 2015, and I took it in 2017, so I took it pretty quickly out of school, but I had all the work experience. It was just a good time in my life, too, because it takes a lot of time to study, and passed them all on my first try, and this is my experience.
Nikki and I negotiated that she'd answer this because I did it 25 years ago, and the test doesn't look, it was paper and trays.
Yeah, you had to do it by hand.
We had to do everything by hand. Carl Ballinger was my study class advisor. We were in the 1990s.
Yeah.
So I know just from what I read and
Another
see.
century ago. My God.
Yeah, so I don't think I'm qualified to answer this.
Well, is the NCARB, do you do it digitally now? Like the fact that you do, who was it?
Yes, digital. It's all digital. And one of the things that was really interesting in the NCARB meeting is they're moving away from learning facts, like knowing when a certain building was built, to knowing how to apply concepts of architecture to different scenarios. So it's more of a thinking test.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know enough about NCIDQ to know about that, but I think the trend is higher level learning objectives, synthesis, integration, trying to understand how the whole thing goes together. And I was really encouraged by that as well. So the studying for the ARE is more about the concepts and how they're applied and less about just remembering facts.
Thanks. I can speak on this endlessly because I just took the NCIDQ exam in October. I took all 3 of them, so I took them all at once. And
Oh my God.
yeah.
And she has a 2-year-old.
I had a 2-year-old at the time and a 10-year-old, 11-year-old at the time, and starting my own company. So it was ambitious. It was definitely ambitious, you know, like I have a brand new firm. Anyway, I took a crack on that thing though, like cramming and studying until you're like just mind is numb. And I passed 1 out of the 3. I passed the FX by like 20 points. And then I failed the PX and the prac by like 12. But that's okay, because I keep telling myself this is not the kind of exam that you need to necessarily pass on the first try. The norm is not, like you're smart, but the norm is not to pass it on the first time, maybe 2-3 times. And I also, between, the passing rate is 500 to 800, you want to pass it like an 800. So I'm taking the PX and also the prac again in April. And so anyone out there or, that has not taken them, is thinking about taking them, that is my mission in this new advocacy chair position, is to get every single person licensed. Like, take your NCIDQ exam. You can do it. We can all do it. That is how we elevate the profession of interior design. Take the NCIDQ exam. And then to specifically talk on the experience of the NCIDQ exam, you're going to a proctored location. You do it in 3 different settings. Each test is about 3 to 4 hours by prac. I'm telling you, I ran out of time. I left like sweating after like 4 hours. Like, it was intense, and it is like that Rob said, it's that higher level thinking. It's to see if you have the problem solving skills, not memorization of facts and figures, things like that. It's all applied knowledge. And they give you case studies, a large commercial, a small commercial, a residential, what have you, and then you have to apply all of the codes. And I think that's one of the interesting things when I do talk to architects, they're like, there's codes on that exam?
It's a largely code-driven, if I'm not mistaken.
It's interior, that's what we're getting tested on,
It is, it's more and more codes, because when I helped work on the exam, you were right, they were pulling away from, they used to have like a simple recognition, an A level question. Then it was a B level question that was a comparing contrast or truth and false. And then the C level question is what you're really given a scenario and you have to analyze and integrate multiple, and that's more like what you have to do in real life.
It's very real life,
And then the other thing is, have they still done the study that it's sometimes better to break it up into the sections rather than, because I heard that the pass rate of doing it all is less than people that
Split it up.
I mean, for my mental health, I would split them up, but I can't imagine. I can't believe you did it all at one time. That's crazy.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
It was a lot.
I mean, I failed my driver's license
What's the worst
exam
thing
3
that
times, so.
happened?
Look at me now.
But
I
that's
don't
just
have a
because
car.
I kept getting so nervous, and I was working myself up for this exam, and I was putting so much pressure on myself, and like barely sleep, just study, and then it's like, my mom actually said it. She goes, what's the worst thing that's gonna happen to me? Like, you're right, take the exam in April, but like, you just do your best.
Well, I learned the hard way in college to never drink and draft because I spilled a margarita all over my drawings. And that was back when we did hand drawings. I think I was like the last generation that did like pencil, hand drawings. So yeah, learned the hard way. So I still turn it in. So it's got a B, it's fine. So I'm gonna briefly skip over some of the. We already discussed how similar the NCARB is in CIDQ. Almost like 70 to 80% of the exam is like quite similar, other than the areas of it. But are there any foreseeable downfalls of qualifying interior designers through licensure by adopting either a Title Act or a Practice Act?
In my opinion, no. I do not believe so. If you have met the requirements and you're educated and you stay within your lane, it's when you wander outside a lane, I think it's a problem. And I think our group, being the president of our group for 15 years, I can guarantee you our whole approach is to stay in our own lane. We really want to work with the interiors and be able to do our work in tandem with the architecture. We're not trying to leave the profession and be better than. It's really a collaborative profession, and we want to be on equal footing, interiors and architecture. So I personally do not think there is a downfall to it. I've been fought by other organizations about it, and my stance was, okay, if you're a regular large architectural firm, and I've worked for some fantastic ones, long ago, Francis Kaufman, and in that, if I wanted to be promoted, well, they didn't have lead then, but I had to take my NCAQ if I wanted a raise, or make sure I'm doing the CEUs, or all of that. So for the larger design firms and architectural firms, I think it would benefit them because it would raise the bar of interior designers.
And the qualifications
and
of
the
the staff.
qualifications, and that you were getting the cream of the crop, the top of the level, and you use it. When I wanted to get promoted in the previous firm, I had to meet all of these standards. And architects, if they want to get promoted, they have to pass their AREs because they want you to elevate their company. So for me, working in tandem with the architects and raising the standards of interior design, I can't see anything wrong with that.
It only benefits the firms. That
It
are
benefits the firm
and
and
it looks
the
great
consumer.
on your resume, and
Yeah.
also the proposals that you put out that you're a very qualified
Yeah.
student. So.
What did the architects think?
It's, architects are not a monolith. It looks like Brian's gonna be raising your hand, Brian.
I can say, unless you want to speak.
Well, let me just say something first, that the architects are not a monolith. There's a lot of disagreement amongst architects in general. Brian and I got to go to Capitol Hill last week because we had Advocacy Day for architects, and we went to visit all the different offices. So I met architects from across Pennsylvania, not only from Pittsburgh, from Harrisburg, from Philadelphia, but also from Bucks County. Very, very great range of feelings about this. Some very strong feelings, no, I'll be honest with you. And other people are like, yeah, this is the right thing to do, right? And so we're actually struggling right now to come to grips with this ourselves. And that's why, by the way, this is so helpful for us, because me and Brian hearing this, we can talk more. But I don't think we have it figured out, to be honest. I'll just be honest. We should have it figured out. We don't. And that's something I'm a little embarrassed about, but I'm not going to lie about it. Brian, you wanted to add something to that? Or?
I can speak loudly too, so I don't need the microphone. But I do work for a big firm, and I will say, undoubtedly, the interior designers I work with, I have so much respect for them. I couldn't do what they do. On the flip side,
Thank you so much.
they also can't do what I do.
100% agree.
100%. So, I mean, you made an interesting point about staying within your lane. At large firms, there are probably more defined lanes, we would say, on the hires. But on the side of a large firm, and this is where I'll disagree with you a little bit, I don't see any need for interior designers because there's the architects that are working alongside them, dealing with those issues that we deal with day in and day out. And on that basis, I think large firms have a great support network for interior designers. The firms I've worked for have great promotion for the interior designers as well. So there's no obstacles in their career. Should there be recognition? We have many interior designers that have credentials, and I think that's great. But I also don't want them signing and sealing drawings. I would say that blatantly.
Why?
I would go into a lot of reasons. I'm not going to educate on why, but they don't know what architects know. And they don't practice. That's important. You actually said something interesting. You say you don't remember a lot of things from the exam in the 90s. I took the exam in the 90s, and I remember a lot of the architecture exam. And I practiced it day in and day out.
Well, just because you don't remember the questions doesn't mean you don't practice them day in, day out.
Concepts.
Because as the profession grows, the concepts grow, the codes grow and change, and as long as you're staying current, I think remembering the questions isn't necessarily important.
The point I'm making is when you practice with architects that are staying current on the codes and people that aren't, who you're going to go to when you have a question about codes.
Well, what's
Some
saying,
interiors
what's
also
saying
do
we're not?
codes. We still.
Yeah, what's saying
I'm
we're
not saying you
not?
don't do codes.
But you just said that aren't staying current with codes. Who isn't staying current with codes? Interiors?
Some of them, yes, but they in certain aspects of the code. Architects look at the entire breadth of the code. So the point I'm making is it gets into a very gray area when you start to open the door and put it on reviewers to decide what is a bearing wall, what is within the lanes, as you said, and what isn't. It gets very confusing.
I also think it's how firms operate, in my opinion, too, because, whatever you guys are saying. No, that was just, I think because some firms, I worked for firms where we had 2 or 3 architects on staff, and then we had 50 interior designers, and the interior designers were really like on top of codes and everything, so I think it really depends on how the firm operates. If you have a firm that's mostly architects and they're like, oh, our interiors department is essentially just doing decorating and doing the frosting, doing the pretty stuff, then fine, that's how you choose to operate, but I don't think, it's a case-by-case basis.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you also have code officials who aren't up to date on codes.
I'm gonna
But they
jump
come
in
for
there.
your inspection.
That is a very good point, because I spend a lot of
You know
time
what, you
educating.
cannot put, and the point of this event is not to cause a fight, and this is not the intention of this, but you cannot pigeonhole interior designers into one qualification that we don't know what we're doing. Because passing the NCIDQ means we know what we're doing. And guess what? I took the well exam a year ago. You know what you do? You go ask the expert. That's what you do. Because there's probably people you go to your office and ask them for help. Or you go to a plumber, or you go to an HVAC expert, or you go to a sustainability expert. You don't know everything either. So nobody can know everything because you are not specifically an expert in every single part of this industry. I don't know about fabrication, a lot of it, even though I work, I might go to like corporate interiors, like Steelcase dealership, to go, hey, I need your help with this. You go to the expert. That's what teaming together and working together is about. It's not about fighting about who's better about who, and that you don't know this, because you don't know how long we've studied, you don't know how long we practiced, you don't know what we've dealt with. So you really can't pigeonhole interior designers into one place and say we don't know what we're doing. And I'm going to leave it at that and move on with the discussion. Thank you.
No, but I want to add something though. I think that there is an entire international building code.
Right.
And the entire international building code is not on the NDCIQ or the NCARB. And I think what Brian was trying to say, that every single day that code is like, and it's the whole code, right? I also think though that I agree with Brian 100% on the code reviewer. So now I'm gonna be the lawyer in the room, right? So the reality is that when you license a profession, you can't rely, like I believe I would have Jennifer like remove a load-bearing wall in my house because I believe she knows what she's doing. But you can't, that's not what you can do. There's things an architect cannot do that a structural engineer can do, And so I think that there's 2,500 municipalities in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and I used to represent some of them, and I'm telling you that the code officials in all those small townships across the country, which is where the disagreements between architects and interior designers are not at HOK, right? It's in the smaller firms and the smaller practices across the Commonwealth, 100%. And that's where the Venn diagram and overlap is the greatest. And so I think when it comes to a practice act, I fully support kind of AI Pennsylvania's position that the line has to be really clear for that code reviewer. It just really does. Because Joe Schmo or Jane Doe at the township needs to be really clear when they're looking at the document and there's a stamp and a seal on there what that means.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Amy, were you going to say something?
What's not clear?
The institution of the architect signing and sealing, so therefore we have to educate everybody about when and how, if interior designers get licensed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, what that means coming across their desk because they've never seen it before.
So
That's the point.
Yeah, it's educating them, so hypothetically, I remove an exterior window and I'm not supposed to, and that small town reviewer may not know. So it's about bringing a clear line to what is.
But there is a clear line, and that's why it was a rhetorical question, is there is a clear line, is that I'm not moving any load-bearing walls, I'm not doing any load-bearing exterior walls, I'm not doing any envelope. That's the line. Done. That's the line. So I don't want to do your job. I want to do my job. And what I'm passionate about is I want to seal my work. I do not need or want someone else to look over and check my work and say, is this woman qualified, when I've met every single check mark, benchmark, and qualification to go, yes, I am qualified. End of conversation. I've passed my exams, my licensing exams, we're qualified, and I don't want to do the architect's work. I want to do my work, and I want to sign and seal my own work for permits. The code officials, sure, there's going to be some catching up to do, of course, but I mean, every few years we're rolling out new codes. Every few months they're rolling out new codes that they, as a code official, have to stay on top of. This is one more thing that they can easily digest. They're intelligent.
Well, on that note, I guess, how can, I'm just trying to transition from that. How can we as designers and those within our industry effectively advocate for the profession of interior design? It's like, what's your elevator pitch? When you're like going down, you're like, I'm not a decorator.
I call myself a commercial interior designer. I don't call myself an interior architect. I call myself a commercial interior designer because I don't want to do residential. I'm not very good at it, and I don't have a flair. So, so I delineate myself that way. But it's our elevator pitch. I mean, if I'm kind of a legislator, is kind of how I opened up here. I'm a commercial interior designer. I'm looking to practice non-structural code regulated interior design in the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and to make, my next question too is just to make this like very abundantly clear to our guests, and I guess also to the public, it's like, when should you hire an architect and when should you hire an interior designer?
Well,
When you're not doing non-load bearing. Simple.
well, there's also when you hire an engineer. There's other.
You should hire a structural engineer.
Yeah.
For those load bearing roles.
But I think it's understanding the scope of the project and understanding what our lane is and what then the architecture lane is, and keeping a very collaborative environment. And kind of, I mean, in the large firms are going to pass things by each other on a regular basis. We get licensure. My practice is not going to change much because I have such a great relationship with my architect. We collaborate on a daily basis, and he'll ask me questions and vice versa. So I believe that when you bring it into an interior aspect, then that is our lane. And then when it's, and I think everyone keeps saying envelope, but I think it's more than envelope. It's core and shell. It's, you know, the elevator, the stair towers, the entrance,
The wall assemblies and all that, the waterproofing.
egress doors, the path to that. So I think it's more than just the envelope. So
It's the context too, like
yeah, there's
exterior
a context to
yeah.
that.
Yeah, so, at least I think so, but I don't know, I could be wrong. Yes, Amy?
I completely agree with you, Jen, and everything that, you know, you just listed off, every single one of those things are covered on the NCIDQ exam, so that we are thoroughly and completely and competently trained in passive egress, in number of egress requirements, and all of the code requirements that make up the interior of that building.
And the best part of if this goes through and we negotiate AIA and IDLCPA and we get this out there, the best thing is we're not restricting any of the professionals, the architects from, we're not saying, well, now you can't do interiors. That's not that at all. You have an established architectural firm that is blasting out interiors. We're not interrupting that flow at all.
And also historically, like, architects have been doing interiors for forever. Like, also just for real, I mean, William Morris, I don't know if he's an architect, but, you know, there's been people who, like, throughout history who have been architects who have been doing interiors, and, like, great architects who have also done furniture design and things like that, who have done amazing work. And so we're not trying to restrict them in any way. We're just trying to create a more safe and beautiful environment. So this is my final question, and this is kind of more of a practicing kind of question, like at work kind of question, but architecture and interior design can go hand in hand. What are some of the best practices for optimizing the working relationship of an architect and an interior designer? And how do these professionals work differently depending on the type of work they do? So like commercial versus residential. When should an architect for residential?
Do you want to take that one? Or do you want to talk?
No, I'm scared to talk.
No.
Not at all.
I mean, I think, and Rebecca, I think Rebecca knows this in the world of architecture, we have issues around women's rights. Just put it out there, okay? So, and we're working on that. We're doing things this year. We're starting to. Have I done anything actually yet? Probably not, but we intend to do a lot. We're working on it. We're working on it. And so, you know, there's this idea of mentoring. There's a difference between being a mentor and an ally. I could be a mentor to a woman as she's becoming an architect, but I could also be an ally. And an ally would say, I see something going wrong here. This woman is not being treated right. As a man, I could step up and call it out. That would be an example of an ally. I don't have enough courage to do that. I'm learning how to do that. But there's a fine line difference like that. So we're looking at a big cultural shift going on that needs to happen. It's just in the infancy of it starting. That's why this discussion is so important, but I think this idea of allyship, not just, we're gonna be friends with the interior designers. I think that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but there are points where there may be a need to do more. And some of it's gender-based and some of it is professional discipline-based, but I think we need to get more sensitive to this. Have a little more courage to step up when you're seeing things that aren't working out correctly.
Okay, well, I also think in a similar vein, education is really important. Just because the other day, a couple weeks ago, another fun story, I was surveying with a coworker, architectural designer, and we were in like a outpatient facility across from a hospital, and I said something about how the building was a B occupancy, and he looked me dead in the eye and went, "Wait, interior designers know what life safety is?" And I almost dropped everything. I was just like, but I said, you know what, this is an opportunity to explain and to teach, and he was very gracious. He apologized. He was very, willing to listen. So I think we need more of that. We need to be more vocal and explain what we really do.
And I want to make this perfectly clear too, is that I know I can speak on behalf of all interior designers here. I have immense respect for all architects. I cannot absolutely do what they do. I love what they do. I also think it inspires me in the work that I do, and I feel like it's a great relationship. I love all my colleagues. I'm very grateful that they're here tonight. I go to them all the time to ask questions, and I think our projects only become that much better when we work hand in hand and we create some really incredible spaces that ultimately uplift our communities.
Say one more thing about that. So you mentioned education. A lot of our abilities or non-abilities or our biases or prejudices are fostered in education. And I think we've got a long way to go in higher ed to start to change the groundwork and change the culture. That is the formative years. That's when students really learn who they are and what their values could or should be. And I think we're not doing a great enough job in higher ed, and we need to work on that. So all of you that are teaching as adjuncts have an opportunity to bridge that gap and start to pull those together. I was talking to one of our great Philly U students, and we tried for many years to work across disciplines. And it's really hard. We are not hardwired to work across disciplines. We are hardwired to silo. That is the quickest, easiest path, but I would encourage all of you to redo your wiring and try to connect more and collaborate more and see each other for their fullness of who they really are.
As a Philly U grad, I thought Philly U did a great job of integrating interior design and architecture. The first year or two, we had the same classes, gen ed, but also foundations of, design studio, we did history of architecture, we did tech together. And then in our third year, we do a project together, which was one of my favorite memories of school. So yeah, I think they did a really good job. And I will say that this coworker that I mentioned went to a program, graduated from a program that did not have an interior design program. I'm not saying that's true of everyone, but it goes back to what you were saying about these prejudices that you gain when you don't experience the other side at all.
Well, I just want to say I'm incredibly grateful to all of our panelists today. I think this was actually a fantastic discussion. Also, for our participants here who are our guests who participated in the conversation as well. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad that there wasn't a food fight because this sweater is way too expensive. But does anyone have any questions or that they'd like to ask the panel before we end for this evening?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I wrote down because English is not my first language, so I don't get lost in my question. I completely understand your point. I'm an architect too. I got a degree in Brazil. So I will read my question to the interior designers. That's why I'm here. I want to learn how work this world of interior designers and architects in United States, because in Brazil we have this problem too, this little fight between them. And for us, interior architects, they are allowed to sign permits for structural challenge that we find on the way. So my question is, when a customer wants to knock that wall down and you need a permit, what do you do? And in my country, the interior architect has the qualification to provide that permit, but the interior designers don't. But the homeowner hired an interior designer. So do you guys are allowed, do you guys do a permit or?
Interior designers are not allowed to permit in
No.
Pennsylvania. In
And
Pennsylvania.
not in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So if for my projects, I do the work and then the architect oversees it, signs and seals it.
Okay, so then you recommend the customer hire?
Well, I collaborate with an architect.
Okay.
So I have to legally have one on staff. So I have one that I work with on a daily basis. So, and I believe all interior designers that own their own business should have that. I can't speak to them all, but yes. So I have to have his final say and pay him.
This is,
No one works for free.
yeah, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
Well, and the architect does have to carry liability, so I don't know if you do. I'm not starting an argument here. I'm just,
No, we do.
you do carry
Yep.
liability. I think that's.
Errors, omissions, general liability, all of it.
Great. Yeah, great to know.
Yeah. And by the way, sorry, the USA women's soccer team beat Brazil last
Oh.
night.
I don't care about soccer. For me, it's fine.
Just saying, no. So yes, as a business owner, I have general liability, service emissions, and all of that you guys do.
Yeah.
Just to, I mean, I'm sure Jen would agree, she would never want to take on that liability of just, the demolishing structure. She would only put herself to be sued. And as a business owner, you would never do that.
It's being about recognized for the work that you've done.
But when sometimes you have that customer that really insists to do some stuff that, you cannot do, or you need to do a big change in the room for what he wants happens.
Well, you have to tell them, this is my understanding, but it is, because it's happened to me, it is out of my technical knowledge. So to keep this safe, I have structural engineers. And then they go, well, if this is going to get that complicated, can we do something else? I go, yeah.
If they don't want to pay for it, ask.
Jenny, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I come from a school of architecture that does not have any interior design. So I was wondering if you guys could speak more about that schooling. Is it a 4-year program, a master's? Like, what is the accreditation for your schooling like?
So I attended a 4-year bachelor's accredited school.
And how common is that? Like, how many schools are accredited?
I have that.
In Pennsylvania, I think there's,
I think there's 15 in Pennsylvania.
It's common.
It's
Yeah,
common.
so it's very common.
Yes.
In fact, it's
It's
almost
not very
ubiquitous.
common, but it's common.
Yeah. Because the other thing is in order to pass your NCAQ, they prefer you to go to a CIDA accredited
Yeah.
It would almost be.
And back in the day, it was called Fighter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually think it
Oh,
would be unwise to
You're dating
pursue
yourself.
an interior design degree in a program that was not accredited. it wouldn't be beneficial.
It wouldn't be
for you.
worth your
Yeah.
time because I don't think you have the same direct path to the
No,
next
you
year.
wouldn't.
You
You wouldn't even have the knowledge that would be necessary.
No, but to answer your question, because I think it is a good and a really important question, as to what do we learn in school? Because I take it in school for architecture.
I graduated, but yeah, I have a bachelor's of architecture from an accredited degree.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you said like you were in school now. But what do we learn in school? I mean, that's a really good question because when I enrolled, I did think that there was going to be some class on like paint colors, something, you know. There wasn't. There was not one single solitary credit or minute that was devoted to anything decorating. Right? Nothing. It's drafting from drafting from day one, but they also throw in a lot of the programming, like those design concepts, so that you can kind of create and problem solve on your own in terms of design. But everything else is drafting the appropriate way, correctly, detailing correctly, and codes, and applying
Roads,
the
anthropometrics, ergonomics, all that stuff.
Health, safety, and welfare of the public. I mean, that is what your education is in depth. Yeah.
I will say at Drexel, our teacher Ada
Mm-hmm.
used to say when people ask that question that we would say, or we should say that our specialty is we cover deck to deck. So from the top of the floor to the bottom of the ceiling, everything inside that scope we study about.
As long as it's not load bearing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But we understand how to do that. I mean,
But we need to learn how to recognize load bearing
Yeah.
so that we know what they're all in.
But we took structure too.
yeah. So I mean,
So that we would
an
understand.
idea.
Yeah, we had the systems class that you would understand it, so you weren't like a deer
Pretty
in
oblivious, yeah.
headlights when a client asked you, and you would direct them to know, we need a structural engineer for this.
Or mechanical electrical.
Yeah, or electrical.
I saw you. I saw you.
So as a student, I feel like you're sort of in a bubble. There's a lot of things that you are not aware of. And as you mentioned, Phil used a lot of, I'm also a student of Jefferson. But that collaboration it's very loud. Like, you know, it's a very nice environment where you're not really aware of these complex issues that happen. So what is one piece of advice that you have to students so that they're able to better face or understand these issues? Because I feel like when somebody asks me the question, are you an interior designer, or what's the difference between an interior designer and interior decorator, or what's the difference between an interior designer and an architect, I get kind of stumped, especially with my parents. For a good 2 years, they thought I was in the architecture program. They didn't know what interior designers were. I'm sure I'm from Bangladesh, so people back home think I'm an architect right now. They don't understand what it is. And it does come with, you know, the education and everything like that. But how do you make sure that students are also active in this? Or what would be one piece of advice?
The professional practice class. Have you gotten to that point yet? Oh yeah, they're supposed to cover that in your professional management and practice class. Really goes from professor to professor whether you're going to actually get that. So, in theory, you're supposed to get that in that class. But obviously, interning as soon as possible. We always try to get all our students to start working as soon as possible so they can really decide if they want to do it. It's not just about learning it. Some people intern and they say, no, I'm out. It's such an important thing. They can save years of college. I know many architects that went through all 5 years because they didn't want to tell their parents that they wanted to change majors, and they're still architects and they're miserable. That's terrible, right? So intern as much as you can. Do not intern for free. And the people that have the firms, please do not hire people for free.
I agree. Okay. My first degree, my first major for 2 weeks was Japanese, and then I switched to interior design. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So, but anyway, just be mindful of time. Thank you all for coming this evening, and please, just to go boxes for 30
Wait,
minutes.
and we got a few more things to go over, but continue,
We do?
sorry, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm just
Oh,
gonna
no,
go over a couple things.
and have another drink. I'm gonna take a I don't know, bottle or something.
So thank you. As we said, we don't want this, we want this to be collaboration. I like what Rob said, it's rewiring yourself to think, working together. So this is just the start of the conversation. This is it, and this is done. So we hope maybe another organization joins us and does this again and continues the conversation.
Have you thought of bringing, because when I helped found it was tied a lot into IFMA, and what would be a good tie-in would be what, GBCA? General Building Contractors?
Yeah, I mean,
Because if you really want to look at your profession, get out of it, work as a contractor, and you really learn what they think of architecture and interior design.
yeah, I mean, we're always open to talking.
I married a
other
contractor, I know what he thinks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's always evolving. But I do want to point out, I guess, that is to a surprise to us in the audience, Virginia Rita, who is, to our surprise, the ASID National Advocate by Design Chair, who came all the way from Pittsburgh for this. So thank you. So she follows always on that bar. She's been such a so to have ASID National support, they were already posting on Instagram. We thank you. So, like we said, it's a continuing conversation. We'll join other organizations. We'll continue to discuss this. It's Rome wasn't built in a day. This isn't going to happen overnight, you know. But a couple of things. I just want to, sorry, going wrong one. Okay. Is to take action, the Advocate by Design Fund. So as we mentioned, tonight's tickets and these sponsorships will go between the ASID Advocate by Design Fund on behalf of the Pennsylvania East chapter of ASID. There is a QR code that goes to the Eventbrite where you signed up. That will be open till tomorrow night at 9 p.m. So if you'd like to donate $5, $10, $100, whatever you want, that will go towards be split between IDLCPA and the ASID Advocate by Design Fund. It's that QR code there. So we join you, you know, another $10, $20, whatever you want, $5, $1, you know, whatever you can do. We don't have control over the Eventbrite fees, sorry. But we encourage you to help us support the cause and keeping the conversation going. Again, I want to thank all of our professional organizations for joining us, IIDA, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware chapter, IDLCPA, AIA Philadelphia, and of course, our sponsors and our host this evening, Voice Metafic Architectures. We have the whole crew back there, a good amount. Thank you for coming. President Hall, Corporate Interiors we've got here, and of course our host for Center for Architecture and Design, who are really helping us bring this conversation forward. A couple little quick, there we go, sorry, people screening. A quick little housekeeping just to let you know, the Philadelphia Region Interior Design Awards. This is the largest interior design competition in the region that is hosted annually by ASID. We bumped it a year. You have 3 years worth of projects. Deadline was last Friday, then it was supposed to be tomorrow. We're giving you to Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. There are 16 residential categories, 15 commercial categories. Everything you see on that sign over there, there are categories before, except for multifamily because we forgot that, sorry. But you can enter. The gala is May 12th at the Great Court at Mitten Hall. It's going to be a semi-formal affair. We're going to have dinner. It's going to be fabulous. But interior projects, if you have not now, if you're a sole practitioner, it's any firm or individual practicing in interior design within the Eastern PA, Delaware, and Southern New Jersey region. So you got a few more days to do that. And also, we do a fun thing called Sips and Spaces. We do a great architectural tour. This is a private tour of the College of Physicians, which was recently renovated by Everline Designs, and Barbara Everline is a longstanding member of ASID. I remember Barbara's name when I was in college. And she's going to be leading the tour. They just recently won a Trumbar Award for Historic Preservation. So that'll be on March 9th. And we have an NCIDQ exam information session, which the CIDQ ambassador, past president of IIDA, Julianne Peters, is going to be hosting that virtually. And we also have the fabulous Student Career Day, the 5th annual one, which I'm really proud that we're gonna be having that again. And that will be April 5th. Registration is open on Eventbrite for firm sponsorships, industry sponsorships, students to register, and volunteers to register. And you guys are going to first to see our annual celebration, Save the Date, will be October 5th as part of Design Philadelphia. It's our board transition, it's our big party. I'm going out with a bang.
I
And
think
it
that's
will
like the
be
first official Design Philadelphia event, Kim.
Yeah.
Like, it's like,
It's
she's
Thursday
so
night.
early,
Yeah.
right?
Thursday
Yes,
night,
yeah.
First official.
I saw it on the website, I'm waiting so I can register. Elizabeth Crafton is over here, she's our president-elect. That's when she becomes president, technically she does on the 1st. But it will be held at the Liberty View Ballroom at the Visitor Center looking out at Independence Hall. Please note, all ASID events are open to anybody. You don't have to be an ASID member, but if you would really like to become one, go see Amanda over there. She's our membership chair from Corporate Interiors. So that, and we have a full calendar on our website of proposed events. We're very ambitious. We missed a couple of things, but we're getting there. So thank you everybody for attending this evening. And we will have this up on YouTube in